Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to bring you something that I know a lot of you have been interested in, and that is the image quality breakdown from the new Sigma 105mm f1.4 Art Series lens, displayed here without the tripod collar to let you see how it looks just in its profile. This is on a 5D Mark IV. Now, obviously, this is somewhat of an impractical lens in the sense of its size and weight, which, for some people may be prohibitive. But I can tell from my first look episode, which if you've missed that, you can take a look at it here, that a lot of you are interested in this lens and of course very intrigued in how it performs optically. And so I believe that today, if you're into this kind of thing, you're in for a treat as we begin to jump into and break down the image quality from this lens. And so because I have a lot to show you looking at images, I'm going to cut this preamble short. Let's jump in. Let's look at the photos together. All right, we're going to start by doing a comparison here between the Sigma, which is on the left, and so these are wide open at f1.4, and then on the right side, I'm using the Zeiss Milvus 135mm f2 as a comparison. A similar lens in the sense that, this, I would say the 105mm lens is probably most going to compete with those that prefer the flexibility over 135mm focal length while achieving something similar when it comes to separation from the background. So of course the Milvus is an apochromatic lens. It is optically one of the best lenses out there, period. So a great benchmark for this exceptional new Sigma lens. Looking at the two images side by side, you can see that the vignette is a little bit heavier in the extreme corners than what it is on the Sigma 105mm. You can also see, looking at this, that the framing obviously is different. And so, there is a 30mm difference between the two. And so the framing is significantly tighter on the Milvus lens. Now, looking at the center of the frame on these two lenses, we can see that both of them are exceptionally sharp. Just really, really incredibly sharp. I will say that micro contrast does favor the Milvus lens, and it's one of the very best out there for this. You can see that, for example, in the grout and then in some of these texture variations, there's just more of a variance between the bright area and the dark areas that allow those textures to just show up a little bit better. That being said, the Sigma is very, very good. So looking off towards edge of the frame, the Milvus, other than the vignette, is really, it's perfect right out to the edge of the frame. The Sigma is also very strong, but right at that last few percentage points, it does fade just a little bit, but still even into the corner, it's quite good. It's just not, the Milvus has that just brilliant micro contrast. There's a little bit of hazing there on the Sigma side that just isn't there on the Milvus lens. Looking over at the right side of the frame, we see that, we have a basically equal result. Both of them seem to be centered quite well, and but the Milvus has just a little bit more micro contrast and resolution out to the edges of the frame. Now, if we compare both lenses at f2, one thing that you will quickly notice is you definitely get a much more even illumination with the Sigma stop down to f2. And so I would say that for practical purposes, you're already pretty near perfect when it comes to vignette use there. And so that really, really large front element and filter thread of 105mm, it shows its worth here. And so let's see how this impacts the comparison of resolution and micro contrast. Now, one thing we can see is that, the Sigma is already very good, so it's had a very minor uptick, and I still think the micro contrast favors the Zeiss lens, but both lenses are resolving incredibly high here. And moving off to the very edge of the frame, the Sigma, I think, is closer here at f2 now, and it's if the resolution isn't and micro contrast isn't as high right into the edge of the frame, the basically complete lack of vignette does give it its own kind of advantage in this comparison. And so, just really an exceptional performance at f2. This Sigma lens is pretty close to as good as one of the very best in this range. Now, an interesting thing happens when you stop down to f2.8. First of all, there is an incredible difference in the Milvus lens between f2 and f2.8. That one stop does just wonders for clearing up the vignette. And as you can see now, I would say it's delivering a significantly brighter looking image at equal settings. And so, you know, a plus for Zeiss there. And looking at things globally, there's definitely more kind of pop to the Zeiss image. Also a little bit maybe pure color, which of course is a, you know, a Zeiss trait there. There's a very slight kind of yellow bias to the Sigma lens, whereas the Zeiss lens is delivering just a more neutral, kind of accurate result. Now, looking at resolution and contrast, I mean, both of them look exceptionally good. The Sigma being very close to the Zeiss lens, although not quite at the micro contrast levels, which are just, I mean, they're exceptionally good on the Zeiss. But I mean, right out to the very edge of the frame, this Sigma is delivering just beautiful resolution. It's incredibly sharp. And I will point out, as I just let you look at the rest of this, that because the Sigma also has autofocus, and in this case, my experience has been extremely accurate autofocus, it means you're going to have a lot more in-focus images than you are with the Milvus lens. The byproduct of that is that while the Milvus might have a slight edge when it comes to absolute resolution and micro contrast, you're probably going to get more sharp keepers with the Sigma than you are with the Zeiss. Now, a quick comparison at f4, we would expect, because we've already seen at f2.8, these lenses are perfect from edge to edge, and at f4, they continue to be just exceptional. And so we can, anywhere that you look on the frame, resolution is, and you know, contrast is just perfect on these. And so, I mean, nothing more to glean here. I mean, from, I would say f2 on with both lenses, your resolution is just flawless. Okay, so here's kind of the main event here. Both of these are lenses that are best served for portrait use. And so in this case, I've tried to shoot as equally as possible with the two, and note that there is some fill flash in these, mostly natural light with just a little bit of fill flash from the right side towards the face there. Looking at the images globally, I would say, I have them both at f2 here for this comparison, I would say that I actually prefer the bokeh quality out of the Sigma lens. It's a little bit softer than what it is from the Zeiss. The Zeiss, however, is going to deliver, I think, fairly clearly the superior three-dimensional kind of pop of the subject. And again, it's that superb micro contrast that just helps so much in producing, you know, just gorgeous, gorgeous portrait results. Now, in this case, what you're also going to see is that, you know, despite my doing, you know, my best, I did not completely nail focus with this. And I was focusing not with live view, but, you know, through the viewfinder, which, you know, with manual focus lenses and Canon bodies doesn't produce the best result. To be honest, I actually prefer using this Milvus lens, which I own, by the way, on my Sony a7R Mark III with an adapter, because I always nail focus. But you can see here for portrait use that at f2, the Sigma lens is just, it's brilliant. I mean, that amount of detail and texture on the face is exceptional. So I would say, looking at the detail level right here, the win goes to the Sigma. But you can see from looking at the front shoulder that the Zeiss is a little bit front focused, whereas the Sigma is perfectly focused. I don't know where it went, but yes, it is perfectly focused. And by the way, I've been able to play with, and I'll cover autofocus more in my final review, but I've been able to kind of set the focus point where I wanted and still get really accurate results. So I'm really pleased with that. But both of these portrait images look really, really beautiful. I slightly favor the global look of the Zeiss, you know, because of the combination of color and micro contrast, but bokeh quality is a little bit softer, I would say, on the Sigma. Now, from here on, I'm going to focus less on comparisons. I've shown you the difference between the Zeiss. I just want to show you more portrait results here. And so as you can see, once again, I mean, beautiful, beautiful skin tones, nicely rendered, gorgeous soft background. I'm really pleased at that medium distance. This, however, I think is the kind of standout of why you would purchase a lens like this. And what this lens allows you to do is something that say an 85 millimeter won't allow you to do to the same degree. And that is to have an environmental type portrait where you put a lot more in the frame while still having a really nice separation of your subject from the background. And so here I'm standing probably about 40 feet away from the subject for the shot, and yet you can see there is a beautiful amount of separation to the background, still a very nice kind of cutout look of the subject, and so it makes for a brilliant, brilliant portrait lens. Here I've thrown some foreground elements, some leaves shot through there, and once again you can see that the foreground nicely blurred out, just allowing you to kind of create a natural frame, and then the subject looks really good. Once again, autofocus is nailed. That's a theme you're going to see, and by the way, I did not have to calibrate the lens. I'm not saying that you won't, but out of the box I've had perfect focus without any hesitation, perfect focus. Now, looking here, I mean, once again, focus is nailed out of the lens. Beautifully, beautifully done. Skin tones look great. And of course, at a closer, head and shoulders, this is a little bit looser framing than head and shoulders, but let's just say a waist high, you're going to see the background just melts away beautifully. I mean, that's a lot of cream there. I'm very, very pleased with that result. Now, yeah, here's me. This was before I had any other subjects, early in the morning, and so I did a selfie. So what you don't see is inside my Bible there, I've actually got my phone hidden in there, and so I'm remotely triggering the 5D Mark IV. But I mean, once again, you can maybe draw less observations on autofocus here because I would be using live view with the remote triggering. But I mean, focus, f1.4, I mean, detail is beautiful there on my less than beautiful face. Looking at the background and the handling of light, everything looks really nice here. I mean, I think that that's a very pleasing end result from that. Here's another, and once again, and in this case, this particular bokeh circle is a little bit bright and standing out more so than what I would like to see. But I mean, if I was actually critically using this portrait, I would probably delete that in Photoshop just because I think it draws the eye a little bit. But other than that, the bokeh is nice, and it's a little scary to zoom into your face like this. But anyway, you can see that detail. This is, skin is not edited here in any way, but you can see that it just produces a really nice amount of detail there. Now, I share this image not so much because there's anything particularly fantastic about it, but I did want to show this if you were shooting outdoor weddings, for example, that I was about 60 feet from this subject, and then the distance from the little gazebo thing here, arch to the background, is probably 20 feet or less. And so, I mean, if you understand the ratio at all, this is a ratio that would not favor any kind of separation of your subject from the background. But because of this focal length and that extremely large maximum aperture, what you see is that we actually do still have a pretty decent subject separation from the background. And so, I mean, if I was shooting a wedding and there were people here in this arch, even though I was quite a distance from them, you would actually have still quite a nice separation to the background. So that's really the biggest, to me, selling point of considering a big, bulky, and expensive lens like this. So while the lens does not have a great maximum magnification figure, nor does it have a great minimum focus distance, because it has a great focal length and it has, as we're going to see, very, very low chromatic aberration. It means that you're able to shoot shots like this. And frankly, when I zoomed in, when I first started doing the episode, the first time I looked at this, I went back and double checked because I'm also reviewing the 70mm f2.8 macro lens from Sigma. And the detail here was so good, I thought maybe I had inadvertently slipped in a macro photo from the other lens. This is not. It's from the 105mm, but you can see really a complete lack of chromatic aberrations, either before the plane of focus or after the plane of focus. So really nice contrast there that, you know, that's a surprisingly amazing result for this kind of lens. And taking that also to another step, here's another, you know, kind of scene that you've got very highly backlit subject here, and so very strong transition areas. So I know from experience, I've shot lots of leaves. I live in Ontario, Canada, and you all that have followed me know that I shoot lots of shots like this. This is a hotbed for longitudinal chromatic aberrations. And as you can see, in either the very dark going to very bright highlight areas where chromatic aberrations would be present, they're not there, and just really, really well controlled. And this is at f1.4. And so, you know, kudos to Sigma. I mean, right here at the very, very edge of the frame, I've got a tiny bit of some purple fringing that's taking place there. But I mean, it's minimal. It's very hard to see other than at a pixel level. And by the way, this pixel level, this is actually shot via adapter on the Sony a7R Mark III. So we're talking a pixel level of 42 megapixels and still a very, very clean end result. Now this just goes to show you that at f1.4, I mean, already in real world applications, just, you know, very narrow plane of focus, but look at the detail and the textures that are on the shot. And then also look, as this again is another situation where you could definitely see some chromatic aberrations, longitudinal chromatic aberrations, and you're just not seeing them there. That white is staying, you know, just very perfectly white going away. So kudos to Sigma. That's a great, great job there. Now, if you stop the lens down, of course, to increase depth of field, it's an extremely sharp lens no matter what. And so here, what you're going to see is that we've got just great detail throughout this scene, even though the people that are in this frame occupy they're very small, you know, compared to looking at it at a pixel level, but yet you can see that there's just really fine resolution. And so, yeah, I mean, it's big and heavy to use as a landscape lens, but at the same time, there's no reason why you can't produce beautiful, beautiful, highly detailed, nicely contrasty results with a lens like this. Okay, I just wanted to show you also just a little bit more. I mentioned it in my first look episode, but here you can see this is the same shot. This is a DNG file, so I mean it's a little flat looking by comparison because it's not been processed. This is the out of camera JPEG, and so, you know, you can see that there is a really, really nice job of illumination correction there. There's not really much in terms of distortion or chromatic aberrations to correct, but I mean, the fact that the camera does support those things now for these Sigma lenses is wonderful. And so you can see, looking at the detail of the JPEG here, this is f1.4, but you can see that it's produced a really, really nice JPEG result. And so, I mean, to me, that's a big selling point for these Sigma lenses, is that now that because you're getting that correction, I mean, look how much brighter the corner is compared to the raw file. And so, you know, as a byproduct of this, you're really getting a fabulous end result. And so, I mean, you know, kudos to Sigma. However they managed to make that happen, good for them. Now, this is an image that I mostly wanted to show to allow us to, you know, kind of dissect the bokeh quality a little bit, some really bright bokeh circles here. And so what we're going to see is that while kind of the Sigma trademark, there is a little bit of internal busyness, not concentric circles, just, you know, activity in there. But what I do see is that the inner ring around this is not highly defined. And so byproduct of that is, of course, that you're going to have, you know, fairly nice transition areas, as we have already seen. And yes, you will see some cat eye or lemon shapes towards the edge of the frame, which, you know, that geometric distortion is very, very typical. Stop down the lens a little bit, and one nice thing about Sigma and their circular aperture blades is probably even at about f2, this will even out a lot across the frame. I also shot some action. I had some sequences with some dogs. I have a friend who is a dog breeder, and so we're out with some of her Goldens there. And as you can see, I was shooting at f1.4 and high shutter speed to freeze action, but you can see that the lens, it focused really well. If it was the most demanding action with the subject moving towards me, I found that the autofocus was sometimes not quite fast enough to keep up with the top action. But under a lot of situations, I was able to get really nice results. And of course, contrast is actually really nice for an f1.4 image, shot in this kind of setting. Now, in terms of flare resistance, here's the two extremes, f1.4, f11. You can see that we have a little bit of some kind of prismatic ghosting taking place here. I would say in both images with the sun right in the frame, we have lost some contrast, so there is some veiling there. At the same time, I'm not seeing anything that is overly destructive to this image, and of course you can bring that contrast back if you so desire, or you can use it to artistic effect, but I'm not seeing anything too incredibly offensive here. So all in all, a pretty compelling performance out of this lens optically. When this lens was first proposed and then arrived to me, I was intrigued by it, mostly because of its extreme nature, the combination of focal length and maximum aperture. I wasn't all that interested in owning one for myself, but having used it in its great autofocus and its incredible optical performance, I have to confess that has shifted somewhat for me, and I certainly am, fighting the impulse right now to where I look at it and say, I wouldn't mind having that in my own kit. And so certainly stay tuned for my final review as I break things down a little bit further, give you a little more feedback and a little more direct evidence of that performance when it comes to the autofocus, along with some more photos that I'll be taking along the way. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, know that this is a really impressive performance by Sigma. They have managed to, I think, check most all of the boxes, outside of the fact that it's big, heavy, and expensive. You knew that going in. The question was, how did the lens itself perform? And I have to tell you that as far as what I've discovered so far in my test, I'm pretty impressed by what Sigma has done here. And I'll tell you more about it in that final review episode. If you look in the description down below, you can check out the image gallery and see not only the images I showed you today, but a whole lot more that I've been taking, more from Portrait series as a part of that. And so jump in and take a look at that. You can also go ahead and order one of these lenses for yourself. There's lots of buying links down there. And thanks to those of you who do use those buying links and help to support this channel financially through that. I appreciate it. And finally, of course, you can follow me on social media. You can become a subscriber to my newsletter. And if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.